Hi everyone, welcome to our MovieTube channel. We created this channel for movie lovers with great reviews and summaries. To stay up to date with our latest videos, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking the button. Today we're gonna recap an American sci-fi action movie, Terminator Dark Fate. Spoilers ahead. Terminator Dark Fate begins with a recorded video playing in which Sarah Connor is convinced that the world's ending in a few years. But we are quickly thrown into the future and we realize that Sarah has stopped the world from ending. And here she is enjoying life with her son John on a beach in Livingston, Guatemala. The year is 1998 and Sarah and John are having new perfect life. But this dreamlike world is ruined when a T-800 Terminator suddenly appears. The Terminator points his gun towards the young John and shoots him. Sarah shoots at the killer, but her bullets are no match for his iron body. Unfortunately, John dies and the Terminator disappears. Now it's 22 years later in Mexico City and a young teenage couple witness the most significant events of their lives. A young woman suddenly appears out of a mysterious power surge falling from beneath a bridge. The couple rescue her, but they're stopped by a group of police officers who believe that they're drugged the young lady. Now the young lady, who in actual fact is an advanced soldier sent from the future, beats up the cops and takes the clothes of our lover boy here. Grace, the soldier, gets on her special mission to protect Danny Ramos at whatever cost. She's been sent from 2042 back to 2020 to protect Danny against what appears to be the soul of her family. She gets her brother out of bed and pushes her father to go to the doctor at noon. But before we wander too far, the unfortunate deed happens. A Rev 9 Terminator appears from nowhere in the same fashion of lightning, intense ice, and electrical power surge. Since it's a pretty normal day, Danny resumes her job at a car assembly plant with her brother Diego, who wants to be as popular as Bruno Mars one day. Then it turns out to be a bad day for Diego, and he discovers that he's been replaced by a machine. Danny goes to the supervisor Craig and pleads with him, and at the same time, guess who makes an entry into the assembly plant? It's our dreadful Rev 9, disguised as her father and holding an automatic weapon. Sarah arrives just in time to stop the Rev 9 from killing Danny, and she escapes with both Danny and her brother Diego, but things quickly get a little complicated because the Rev 9 divides himself into two using his shape-shifting ability. He pursues the trio and eventually catches them in almost an instant. Despite Grace's attempts to derail the Terminator with iron bars, he gains on him and tears off their tires. Unfortunately, Diego is killed along with his dream of being Bruno Mars. Right before he dies, Diego, as a loving brother, begs Grace to take care of his sister against all odds. With Danny and Grace now in his grip, the Rev 9 should be able to kill them in a minute. And suddenly Sarah Connor appears out of nowhere and temporarily disables the two divided entities with explosives while escaping distraught. Danny has to be taken back home. She just wants her former life back, but that's no longer an option. Grace explains that Danny's father has also been killed. Remember how the Rev 9 took the skin of her father to attack Danny at the assembly plant? Well, it turns out that he died immediately after that happened. So Danny and Grace escape with Sarah's truck, with Grace stabbed. They arrive at a pharmacy where Grace gets anticonvulsants and a bunch of other drugs. Unfortunately, the injured woman passes out, and this is where Sarah catches up with him immediately. She regains her truck and helps the unaware Grace. So Sarah joins the team and together they find a motel. They want to find a motel to hide. Here we get confused. Why did Sarah come back after all these years? How did she know the right time to appear? Does this involve her son? Of course it does. Sarah initially reveals that she is wanted in 50 states. And this also affords Danny to finally have the time to mourn her brother. She cries that no one will remember that he existed. or that no one will even take time to bury his body honorably. Now, while Nouvelle Grace dreams of a post-apocalyptic world, most definitely her future, where she and army of soldiers fight Fury Rev 7s. Grace suffers a deadly stab and she is picked up by other soldiers before she dies off, a few seconds after she wakes up at gunpoint. Sarah explains that, years after the death of her son, she received information that showed where Terminators had appeared in several parts of the timeline. Despite being in different locations, Sarah has found an interesting way to find them immediately after they arrive, and guess what encrypted message include every time? Sarah explains that this allows her to kill the Terminators before they become a threat to anybody, except this one, with Danny. And here's where it gets a little complicated again. Grace goes into Chips to inform Danny that Skynet and John Connor don't exist in her future. This suggests that Sarah successfully destroyed Skynet. Also, it brings Cyberdyne to mind, whose defunct state also contributed to the death of Skynet. And there is more bad news. It's not just Danny who's in danger. The entire world and the future of humanity threatened by an AI known as Legion, which is definitely a smart allusion to the Legion in the Bible, and unfortunately this means the Terminators will be countless. Anyway, Legion was originally created for the purpose of war, but all thanks to age-long evil ways of mankind, this project becomes a replacement for the destroyed Skynet. Eventually, Legion would become a threat to all of mankind, and there would be an attempt to neutralize its effects and its growing influence. But again, wrong decision. The people in charge decide to neutralize this menace with a bunch of nuclear weapons. Oops! This in turn creates a nuclear holocaust. Yeah, that sort of thing kills off all the humanity and the trees and animals and plants and basically all forms of life, and if you think that's bad, just wait till you hear this. The Legion doesn't completely die, but instead creates a global network of dangerous machines, or Terminators, who go in search of human survivors and kill them off. Why is their resolve to kill humans so strong? Oh well, left with no other choice, the survivors decide to form a coalition against the Legion. They form a group known as the Human Resistance, and they're tasked with fighting against the threat of a Legion. Hey, don't get confused. Just note that all of these will happen in the future, and somehow the destiny of Danny is tied to the Human Resistance. And perhaps she is the reason the Legion would lose the war. Grace refuses to reveal role in all of these, but it only takes a few more events before she spills the beans. Back to the present. Grace traces of Sarah's messages to somewhere in Texas. While this could have passed as an all-girls trip, the arrival of the Rev 9 Terminator sort of changed. They barely escape the ferocious hands of this beast, and when they arrive at their final location, they're met with more shocking news. Remember the T-800 that killed John at the start of the movie? The one with dark shades and an unreputant heart. Yeah, that one. Right there. So you already know that Skynet went dead after Sarah rained her revenge on him. But did you ever wonder what happened to all the T-800 soldiers that were sent to kill people? Well, one of them became a father. The T-800 that had killed John so many years back now is different. Before you admit to the impossible nature of that, here is the actual story behind it. So after Skynet became non-functional, most of the T-800 became useless, and they aimlessly roamed the Earth after its mission killing John. The T-800 began learning and eventually became self-aware. During all these years, the machine learned to behave like a human being, learning social cues, developing conscience, and finally adopting a family, a wife, a son, and a dog. Can you believe that? A human family naturally? He adopts the human name Carl, and his wife offers sandwiches to the group. It's also nice to see the fine relationship he shares with his son, Matthew, but this doesn't change the fact that he killed John Connor, who was around the same age. Sarah explains that his actions years back had a damaging effect on her, and to redeem itself, Carl informed Sarah that there are still soldiers out there, and he offers to join in their fight against the Rev 9. No, Sarah doesn't agree. Who wants to fight side by side with the same person who killed her son? However, Sarah knows that this is the only way they would stand real chance against the Rev 9, and perhaps the only way they can save the life of Danny. Also, Carl admits that because Sarah had destroyed the Skynet, he had the chance to be free. While he could choose not to go with the group, he would join the team and protect Danny with his life, Carl says. Carl gives him access to his room filled with weapons, and they also teach Danny how to shoot. Carl goes with him, but not before he says an emotional goodbye to his family and also urges to make their escape. Eventually, the Rev 9 finds Carl's house, but by the time she reaches there, everyone's gone, including Carl's family. Now, together with the group, they proceed to find an EMP, a military-grade electromagnetic pulse, a weapon strong enough to kill the Rev 9. They get it from an old friend of Savis, a major in the military, but no place is too far for the Rev 9 to find him after a brief while. The Terminator appears again in a stolen police chopper, and another intense fight happens. Sarah's old friend, the Major, calls for backup from a nearby military base, but this still isn't enough to stop the Rev 9. So their group escaped this Rev 9 in a stolen plane, but they lose something almost as valuable as their lives. They lose the EMPs that they tried so hard to get. Now in the plane, we finally find the answer we've been looking for. The answer explains that why Danny is such a hot target for the Rev 9. Grace reveals during the fight that Danny would become the founding commander of the Resistance, and the Resistance will eventually be the death of the Legion. Exactly. This explains why they want her dead by all means. If the leader doesn't survive till the future, then there is a 90% chance that the Resistance will never be logical. This means that the Legion will easily win the war against humanity. Smart thinking Legion. Interestingly, Grace reveals that it's Danny who saves her life in the future, in the ruins after Judgment Day. Now in the ruins, we see Danny, now a street soldier, beat up 3 men and mention that this is exactly what Legion wants them to do. Kill themselves. In fact, Danny raises Grace and trains her to become the soldier that she is. Further explains that Danny turned scavengers into an army of hopeful soldiers. Now during the group's little story time, the Rev 9 regains his energy and he makes his way to the plane. Just how powerful is this guy in swift calculated movements? The Rev 9 subdues Carl temporarily, and this gives Grace, Sarah and Danny an opportunity to escape from the Rev 9. The group escapes with separate parachutes and they land in the river, which is situated close to a hydroelectric plant, but just like every other time, the Rev 9 pursues him with Carl, also on his trail. Badly bitten, they run inside the plant, but with the Rev 9 following the battle, only continues Carl and Grace realize something more interesting. To kill the Rev 9, they have to do something that would have an insane effect on the Terminator. Perhaps an explosion. The Terminator is forced into a spinning turbine, and this consequently causes an insane explosion, one that not only critically injures the Rev 9, but also Carl. Unfortunately, it affects Grace, who's wounded quite badly. But if you thought this fight was over, you're definitely wrong. The Rev 9, in its almost destroyed phase, still wounds Sarah, and this means that Danny would have to fight with it herself. Well, that sounds like a bit of a joke. So Grace, in a motivational sequence, urges Danny to tap into her power source. While this would have been great if it happened, Danny is still too weak to fight against the Rev 9. The Terminator quickly overpowers and would kill her. Save for the intervention of Carl. Before now, Carl had reactivated itself, recovering from the bombing. So Carl attacks the Rev 9, stopping it from killing Danny, and this gives the young lady the chance to grab Grace's power source. Now with this power source, Danny stabs the Rev 9, which plants a bomb in. But right before it blows off, Carl grabs the Rev 9 and jumps off the ledge, blowing the two Terminators to their death. Perfect ending, right? Maybe not. Because we also lost Grace, Danny's brother and father as well. Anyway, several years later, we see Danny and Sarah watching a younger 10-year-old Grace, at this time playing with her family at a playground. Perhaps we'll get the ending we deserve. If this duo is able to prevent the death of Grace and also the rise of Legion, however, this would mean they'd have to fight off more Rev 9s and definitely angrier ones. Just before they drive off, Sarah tells Danny that it's for her to get ready, which suggests that a new war is about to start. This was a review for Terminator Dark Fate, which was directed by Tim Miller and produced by James Cameron and David Ellison. It features stars like Linda Hamilton, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mackenzie Davis, Natalie Rice, Gabriel Luna, and Diego Boneta.